Okay. All right. Welcome, everybody. My name is Matt Raddick. I'm with MonkeyPod. We're a software provider for nonprofit organizations, and I'm joined by Jenn. Jenn, would you like to introduce yourself?
Certainly. Jenn Viridis. I am the CEO of Ethical Profits. We are an accounting firm for nonprofits or occasionally small businesses that are on a mission of some sort. But I really enjoy my nonprofits. I've been doing this long enough that I can be a little bit picky. And so I left the small business arena so that I could pursue what makes my heart feel good. So I'm
That's
with nonprofits.
great. Love that. That is
In
fantastic.
particular, I want to clarify this collaboration between myself and MonkeyPod
Yes.
is based on the fact that I am an accountant who's worked in QuickBooks and Xero for about 25 years in varying capacities. And I stumbled across MonkeyPod about a year and a half ago and was blown away. And as a result, I am now here as their advocate to make sure other nonprofits know what this accounting software can do and why it's probably better for your nonprofit than QuickBooks and Xero are currently serving you.
Yeah. Thank you, Jenn. Yeah, it's been a pleasure working with you. We were glad to have crossed paths with you. So today we're going to be talking about nonprofit bookkeeping challenges, some of the most common ones that Jenn encounters and that we encounter, and we're going to talk about how we can address some of those challenges in MonkeyPod. So we'll be showing you around this platform a little bit, as well as just giving you some insights and things like that. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jenn to start sharing screen and walking us through the presentation.
All right. So we are going to be talking today about 3 common nonprofit bookkeeping challenges and how to solve them specifically in MonkeyPod. And context here is I've been doing this for about 25 years, so I'm pretty familiar with most of the bookkeeping challenges that come around, although I still do get surprised. So feel free to try to surprise me at the end of this. I do very much love challenges. Let's jump into our agenda. Well, okay, you already know the slide. We're going to be looking at 3 challenges: tracking restricted grants. We're going to look at a solution for that. We're going to look at the cost of reimbursable grants and, of course, how to get those reimbursed, as well as the solution that MonkeyPod offers for this. And the third one is one complaint I hear often from operations, which is our teams are out of sync. Our grant manager doesn't always know what's coming the door from our bookkeeper and vice versa. So teams out of sync is another really big challenge that MonkeyPod solves. And at the end, we'll do a little call to action and a Q&A. If anybody has any questions or specific examples they'd like to present, that's the place to talk about it. So we will be doing that at the end. If you have any questions, in the meantime, drop them in chat. We'll be keeping an eye on that. But if you've got specific ones and you want to throw them at us and see what we can do with them, hold those till the end. We're happy to help. I'm Jenn Viridis, and I have been a CEO and a finance department executive, whatever you want to call it, in some varying capacity for the last 25 years. I am not a CPA. I want to make that very clear. I don't do taxes. I do the accounting, the finance department, the bookkeeping, how the money moves throughout the year. How do we track those grant funds? And we do that all within the umbrella of MonkeyPod. Every once in a while, we have some ancillary services that come in, such as Gusto, for instance, talking to your MonkeyPod file. Pretty important to have that if you've got payroll running. But outside of that, we're talking today about bookkeeping challenges, the actual finance department and how the finance department works and how you can solve problems in that finance department that you might experience as a leader in a nonprofit. Matt, did you want to give a little bit of bio or background about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Matt. I head up the marketing department here at MonkeyPod, but we are a small team, a small but mighty team, we like to say. So I have my hands on a lot of different things as well. You'll see my name pop up answering support tickets and things like that as well. But yeah, I've got a bunch of experience working with nonprofits, primarily helping with fundraising and doing different creative projects to help organizations raise funds. And yeah, I'm really proud to be able to bring a software solution that can solve a lot of these challenges and be an alternative to something like QuickBooks that is really designed for the needs of nonprofits as opposed to trying to get a for-profit solution twisted and turned to work for nonprofit businesses. So
Yeah, and we're going to be talking a lot about those comparisons today. Um, let's jump into the next slide. So our first challenge, let's jump in. How do we track restricted grants? QuickBooks and Xero were not originally designed for nonprofits. Not sure if any of you know that, but they did eventually try to come up with solutions that would kind of bridge the gap, but they're clunky. They don't always work. And in the process of trying to get your restricted grants to do restricted grant things the way they need to do it in your books, you end up having to rely pretty much exclusively on your bookkeeper's ability to remember and catch all those details, all the little nuances that have to go in to how you record the release of restricted grant funds, how you spend those funds down. We're going to be looking at a couple of examples in a moment here as to how MonkeyPod solves this problem, but a couple of examples I'd like to give you of things that happen traditionally in QuickBooks, for instance. QuickBooks generally allows you to build things and structure things the way you want, but there are some restrictions in place. And more importantly, you have to know how to build it. So if you are an accountant for nonprofits like myself, and I come into a client space where they have their own chart of accounts built out and their own processes built out, but it's not really working, for me to rebuild that, I have to know what I'm doing because QuickBooks won't walk me through that for me. I have to know. So it puts the burden of expertise and compliance in the hands of the person that built your file. That's risky, especially as things change over time. It's one of the areas that MonkeyPod does really well, really good work, is they do not leave the burden of all that knowledge and expertise in one person's head that built the system. They built it, they know how it works, and it works this way for nonprofits because they've solved all these problems that nonprofits brought to the table for them. I will say manual workarounds are not my favorite. I call it the M word, the manual word. I don't use that word very often because I don't like manual work. Manual work is prone to errors and mistakes. Not sure if any of you have noticed that, but I've noticed that across my team for sure, and across myself too. I also am prone to making mistakes because I'm human. Some of those mistakes, some of those data points that are most prone to error are solved with MonkeyPod's system. So you don't have to worry about something getting saved that didn't have, for instance, the functional expense associated with it. It defaults and it pulls it into a category for you. So you're never left with any expense on the books that just is floating out there with no SFE defined, which is what happens when you use QuickBooks and Xero. And then, of course, compliance risks. I have seen multiple scenarios where people have executive directors or leaders of nonprofits have lost grant renewals because they could not generate the right report. They couldn't prove that they spent the money that the way that the grantor wanted them to spend the funds. And as a result, they weren't able to get that funding the next time it rolled around. Their reputation was injured in the process. These are optics. These matter. These are big, important reasons to have an accounting system that delivers exactly what you need for your funders and your grantors. It is not just about your team delivering financials to your board. This is about you being able to report that you stewarded those funds the way a funder expected you to do. Those are all things that we can do in MonkeyPod with far less manual effort, if any, versus what we experience in QuickBooks and Xero. And again, manual equals eventually mistakes. It may not be every day, but you will eventually have mistakes with manual data entry. There is no way to avoid it. We're humans. We can't help that. Let's look at some examples. So how MonkeyPod tracks restricted and unrestricted funds automatically. I'm going to let Matt share his screen here because I want him to show what MonkeyPod can do here.
So I'll start here on the chart of accounts. And I think the thing to just indicate here is that on your list of net asset accounts in MonkeyPod, we have dedicated accounts for each of your restricted funds, each of your restricted grants. This is one of the things that is sort of paramount to the philosophy of how we built MonkeyPod, is that we want to use nonprofit terminology to talk about nonprofit things. So if you go into your finance menu, we have transaction types for donations, for pledges, for grants. So when you need to record a new grant, you just create a new restricted net asset account on your chart of accounts. Anything else to discuss here, Jen, or should I go into releasing funds for those two?
I think we should take a look at one of the release of funds, like pick
Okay.
one of those grants and let's release some funds.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so just jumping into one of these grants here, you can see all the transactions that are associated with this grant all the way back to the initial award. And then when you look at the grant itself, you're able to see at a glance how much has been awarded, how much has been received, how much funding has been released, and then, of course, how much is remaining. One of the other things that we do is we do unlimited data. So any reports or any award letters or anything like that, you can upload those right to the transaction itself. And that way you always have that information kind of at your fingertips.
And
And
let's
then,
take a closer look at this, by the way. Can you scroll back up? I just
yep,
want to
please.
clarify for everybody that's watching. Um, the award is listed here. What we've received of that award is listed here on this view. What we've released of the award is listed on this view, and what is remaining is listed on this view. There is nowhere in QuickBooks or Xero that shows this information. Not like this. You have to pull it from multiple sources, which is time consuming. If you want your grant manager to know at a glance how much they have remaining in their funds, for instance, or how much they still need to raise, because we also build budgets in MonkeyPod that show how much we've raised for specific programs and how much is remaining to raise. All of that can be tied back to this view. So your grant manager always is plugged into what's going on with this specific grant. What have we spent? What do we have left? Or your team and operations, all of them that need to know what's going on with these grant funds. Your bookkeeper, let's go ahead and scroll down and let's take a look at how the restrictions are released. The restrictions are released by spending the funds in accordance with what the grantor told us to spend them in. So in this case, we have a bill from Amazon. We have a check to Christopher Wyberding, if I pronounce that correctly. We have another check to Brian Flynn. Like, these are all expenses that we have told the system, MonkeyPod, the bookkeeper, when they entered that check to Christopher Wyberding, because there are essentially two ways to tell MonkeyPod that you want an expense to be paid for with these grant funds. Let's go ahead and hit edit.
Yep.
All right. So do you see that first row here where we have 2,500? We've got the expense account coded to grants and direct assistance. We have a class coded, which we're going to talk about in a moment. We have some tags coded, probably too much to talk about in today's call. But more importantly, that apply restricted funds has a grant selected. This is the data entry. This is the only thing the bookkeeper has to select. They have to pick the grant. Once they pick the grant, go ahead and exit out of this edit view. Let's take a look at the debits and the credits. Are any of you accountants, by the way? Let me know in the comments if you are. I'm going to do a very simple overview because most people do not enjoy talking debits and credits like I do. Alicia is. All right, awesome. By selecting that grant, look at this entry on the back end. We still have our debit to the expense account. We still have our credit to our checking account, but now we also have a debit to the grant fund, those restricted assets, and that reduces the remaining value of that restricted grant. And we have the credit to our income account, our NARFR income account. If nobody's familiar with that term, NARFR is net assets released from restrictions. It's that special income that you only declare when you earn it. And you've earned it by having this expense on your books, by incurring this expense in the first place. So your income is recorded in the same entry as your expense is recorded. So you don't have to worry about date issues. For instance, having your income declared in a different period than when you restricted it, that is now gone. That is now no longer a factor. That's huge. As someone who's done grant reports for a while, that's huge. Let's take a look at a restriction release that is not tied to a specific expense like this is. This is tied to that $2,500 specific expense payable to Christopher. But you can also, if you don't want to do it by the granular level, expense by expense like that, you can also do an overarching restriction. When you know that the restrictions have been satisfied, you can come in here, date it the month that you are releasing that restriction and declaring the income, add in how much you're releasing, put in your accounts, and that will do the exact same thing. It will enter in here our debits and credits necessary to release that restriction and declare the income that we are attesting we have now earned.
So if we save
Again,
that
this
here,
is not something QuickBooks does.
yeah.
And I'm not trying to bash on QuickBooks, okay? I know that it sounds like that, but tools matter. And there's so much that we as human beings using computers now have to learn and have to remember to do and have to do right every single time if we're going to compete with all the other things that are happening out there. It's too much. This relieves so much of the mental burden from your team when they have to do the data entry to know that it's being done correctly. They don't have to do journal entries for any of this because it's all captured under an intended purpose with the right language at the top of the screen. 990 reporting. Let's talk about 990 reporting really quick. Matt, if you could reshare and let's pull up a statement of functional expenses.
Hmm. Yeah, so one of the things that I always like to highlight is that the standard reports that you need for filing your 990, those are just built into MonkeyPod.
Yep.
I've seen a lot of QuickBooks exports that have been converted into a statement of activities or a statement of functional expenses, but in MonkeyPod, it's just as simple as clicking that statement of functional expenses. And I'll run the report here and we'll see what we have.
I want to highlight a couple of things here. On the 990, you are required to split out your expenses into these three fundamental categories: fundraising, management in general, and programs and services. If any of you have prepped a 990 before, you know what I'm talking about. In QuickBooks, you have to build this as classes and remember every single time to tag that class or to select that class, excuse me. If you don't in MonkeyPod select the class, it defaults to shared expenses, which means that your bookkeeper really is just asking one question. Is this expense that I'm entering right now exclusively related to fundraising, management in general, or programs and services? And if it's not exclusively related to those three, it'll default to shared expenses. And at the end of a period, you're going to allocate those shared expenses based on percentages that your team decides, along with your bookkeeper and your accountant and your CPA. Let's take a look at those allocations. So
So
in this default example, everything is 33%. But let's say that your individual organization only spends about 10% of your expenses on fundraising. Cool. Let's adjust fundraising to 10%. Let's put management at 33 and let's put the rest into programs and services. And this is how we are telling MonkeyPod to split up that big bucket of shared expenses that the bookkeeper said, these don't belong in exclusively one of those three categories. They're really kind of shared across all of them. Anyway, so this is now split. Those percentages are now added into these columns. So once you've decided what those percentage splits are for your year, which you would typically go by history and just look at the actuals and extrapolate those actuals to your shared. It's a very simple math equation, not hard to come up with that. Or the CPA has their own method of doing that. That's fine too. Whatever the methodology is, though, this split allows you to generate your SFE, your statement of functional expenses, in those three buckets with all of your shared expenses allocated across them in the percentages that you defined. So before we leave this page,
mhm.
there's one of the things that I really appreciate about how MonkeyPod works is its ability to track programs. And as you can see on this screen, we have programs and services listed as a singular column. But there is a way in MonkeyPod for you to break that column into the actual programs that are underneath that umbrella. Let's take a look at the income and expenses by class. Assuming that this sample file has, there's lots of
Yeah,
programs
yeah,
in
yeah.
here.
Mhm.
So if you see, we still have fundraising, we still have management in general. Those numbers haven't changed. The actuals are represented here. But now we have a couple of extras. We have membership development. We have 891 Art Gallery and Sculpture Garden. We have some income associated with that. If we have any expenses that were specifically attributed to this, then they're going to be in this list because your bookkeeper should have caught them and tagged them as such when they're entering it. But this allows you to track essentially your revenue and expenses by program. So that art gallery program, and the sculpture program, and the community development program, and the education program, all of those can have their own, what the for-profit world would call a profit and loss, for us as an income statement or statement of activities. We can see this all by program. Not hard to set up. The only thing your bookkeeper needs to remember is which program it is, which if you develop SOPs is not very hard to do. Just takes building the system of getting that data to the bookkeeper at the right time. This is where your program managers are going to want to come and see, do I need to earn more to cover the costs of this program? Or is this program going out of budget? Are we spending more than we expected to? Do we need to go pull up some funding, drum up some funding somewhere? I don't know. That's where you would determine those answers, is on this report.
One of the other things I'll highlight here, Jen, is the way that this can work with budgets as well. So
Yes.
we have a bunch of different options for budgets up in the finance menu. And the big thing to note here is that you can do budgets across a variety of different scopes. You can do it across your whole organization for a specific class or program, for a specific grant or a specific tag. So to the point that Jen just made, if we wanted to look at specifically the education programming budget, we can pull that up and we're able to see how much budgeted income that we're expecting to get, and then we're tracking our actuals in real time here so that we can see how we're performing against that. And we can look at our performance both at a percentage and at a dollar amount value as well. So way behind on that income, but we are racking up expenses. So it sounds like we've got some work to do ahead of us. But the other thing
The
that's
other
nice here is you can do this at a grant level as well, so that you're able to see your budgeted, how much you expected to get for this grant award, how much was actually received. And then as you're going through and you're recording your different expenses, these actuals are going to update in real time. As you're assigning a class to them, as you're applying restricted funds to them, all this stuff is going to update automatically. So your whole team can sort of at a glance be on the same page with where you're at for a budget, whether it's for a program, a grant, or even across the whole organization.
One of the other benefits of this is just in addition to being able to create pretty much unlimited budgets along all the various points that you're tracking, whether it's by the grant, by the program, you can also do roll-up budgets.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have, for instance, a program that 3 different funders are funding, then you would build 3 individual budgets for those 3 funders and then create a roll-up budget that brings all 3 of those into it, so you can see how the program is performing across all of those 3 funders. That's also something that is possible if you build it right. All of this is potential build within MonkeyPod, but it's all customizable at the same time to accommodate the fact that nonprofits do very different things. It's large enough to pretty much accommodate all of the needs that the various nonprofit industries would bring to the table. This is going to accommodate 99% of them. The budget roll-ups in particular are one of my favorite features here because there's such transparency with your team, being able to pull up a budget and know exactly where they are because it updates in real time. As soon as the bookkeeper enters the numbers, they're reflected on these reports.
And
All right.
yeah, you can create any number of different budget roll-ups. So we see folks do something like if they want to keep track of 3 different programs next to each other, they can do that. If you want to create quarterly budgets for your organization, you can do that. If you've got a multi-year grant, maybe you want to look at, year 1 versus year 2, you can do that. We've got a bunch of reimbursable contracts in this account, and so we've got all of those stacked up next to each other. So there's just a lot of flexibility with how you can use these things here. All right,
And
I'll
yes,
let
it
you.
looks a little overwhelming because this is a sample file.
Yes, yeah.
Yours probably won't look this overwhelming,
This is true. Yeah.
but this is utilizing all the bells and whistles, and it's going to have everything in there. All right, let me go back to this and let's keep going. All right. So we talked about how MonkeyPod tracks those restricted and unrestricted funds, specifically by the individual expense or doing a mass release. We talked about how it supports 990 reporting with that SFE and how you can split out your shared expenses across the 3 primary categories on a 990 that the SFE is going to ask for. And the fact that we're reducing manual entry and errors by doing this all through a MonkeyPod system that automates the debits and the credits, which is the biggest risk of human error and the most likely point where you're going to end up with a mistake in the books that you don't catch until you print out a funder report. Let's go ahead and jump into the next one. Challenge 2, reimbursable grants. So if you've had a grant that is going to pay you out at the end of the period and you basically send them an invoice, that's what we're talking about, is a reimbursable grant, the ones that don't give you the money up front. In MonkeyPod, we call those contracts. Different terminology, same concept. It's just a grant that gets paid out at the end of the period based on you submitting an invoice that proves that you already spent the money. We have a different method of tracking that in MonkeyPod under contracts. And in particular, one of the best reasons to use MonkeyPod, in my opinion, for these reimbursable grants, this is where a huge benefit comes from. QuickBooks, I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but QuickBooks likes to change their fees a lot. Likes to raise them a lot too, but especially change it, which makes it confusing because what you had in your QuickBooks file as a feature 2 years ago is no longer exactly what you have now. because they change their subscriptions a lot. They change the features that they include. They change the bells and the whistles. They change the interface and the way the screen looks. Don't get me started on that. Going to put a pin in that one. But one of the things that they're very happy to do is raise your fees. At the moment, the cost of doing reimbursable grants in QuickBooks is over $3,300 a year, just right now, based on their current pricing. And that's using all the data entry manually that you're going to need your bookkeeper to do. So it still doesn't get rid of all those risks. It just gives you the features you need to be able to do a reimbursable grant. That's it. It just allows you to project track to the point where you can include expenses on an invoice that you want to get reimbursed. The feature to do that is only on QuickBooks Advanced right now. Could change in the future. They like to change things, like I said. But right now, that it's going to cost you more than MonkeyPod just to do reimbursable grants. Just one thing out of a dozen other things that you're going to need your accounting system to do for you. One of them is these reimbursable grants. And sometimes those are some nice money, especially when the government's involved. Depends on what is going on in the government. But if you have a reimbursable grant, those are sometimes very large sums of money. So you really want to get those right. MonkeyPod gets them right. And I cannot say the same for QuickBooks, especially not at the price point that they offer that feature that is necessary in order to do this. Do you mind sharing your screen really quick, Matt? Let's talk about how those reimbursable contracts work. I think that's worth showing.
Yep.
All right. So here's our contract tracker. So we've got 3 contracts here. So similar to when an expense gets entered that's going to be covered with a restricted fund, this is a similar mechanism. The bookkeeper is going to need to select something from a list in order to make this work. As long as they select it from the list, though, it works. Let's go into one of the expenses, any one of those contracts. Let's take a look. What are their expenses? We're going to look at reimbursable expenses. Perfect.
Yep.
So in here, you can see our total award. You can see that we have tagged $1,750 worth of expenses as reimbursable from this contract. And currently that is available to invoice. If the terms of that contract allow us to issue them invoices now, we could send them an invoice for $1,750. Some contracts want it monthly, some of them want it at the end of the period, just depends on the contract, but it's there, ready to be invoiced. And it is all based on the bookkeeper simply selecting from a drop-down list that USDA contract. A little bit of training, that's what you expect them to do. It's one of the very few things that they need to get right every time. We don't rely on computers to decide this for us because there's way too many opportunities there to make mistakes that the team is not aware of. So you do need a human being doing this at this point, choosing the contract, choosing the grant.
Yeah, and just to underline that point, so that the process is really, really simple. It's just when you are recording the expense, the same way that we did with that reimbursable grant, you're entering in, who is the vendor, you're going to enter in the amount, the account, the class, and then under tags, you have all of your contracts listed out there. So we selected that this was the 2025 USDA contract, and then that means that it is going to appear as an expense related to that contract. You can see we've got 2 expenses. That's what's giving us our total of $1,750 on the reimbursable expenses here.
And at this point, you would just create the invoice and pull in that expense category and send that out. It's already right there, ready to be checked off. It'll help you generate the total. If you have multiple, for instance, on that list, a whole bunch of numbers on there, you can pull all of them into the same invoice.
Yep. And then you've got your invoice here. You've got it marked as paid or unpaid. If you want to, you can request payment for it right from MonkeyPod. You just need to have an email address on file. I know a lot of these funders don't necessarily want to pay via your invoice link though, so you can always just upload whatever invoice template they want you to use right here. And then when you're ready to record a payment, you just do that right here. A lot that can be expedited if they are willing to use the payment links that are included in MonkeyPod, because then all that stuff is going to be handled for you automatically. But if they, have a specific template that they need you to use, you can certainly use that as well, and then just upload it here so you have record of it.
It's really quite useful for those for those reimbursable grants to be able to prove to them every single time you're issuing an invoice what's going into that invoice, and it all ties back to the individual transactions. All right, let's jump into our next one. budget to actual. So we did look a little bit at this before. Let's go back to that for a second because I want to talk a little bit more about that, specifically from the perspective of um, CRM and how we would integrate our team. We're going to start talking about syncing things across our team next. So I want to start talking about that, and particularly how you would have a team member come in here, for instance, that is responsible for the 2025 National Convention. Let's go ahead and pull that one up. It's fourth one down.
Yep.
And your team member is responsible for purchasing the stuff you're going to be purchasing for this convention. They need to bookmark this. They need to see what their actuals are as time goes. Now, this relies on you creating the budget in advance, telling them this is what you have available to spend for this, but this is where they're going to track their actuals. They're just going to bookmark this and come take a look at it anytime they need to. Individual team members with individual reports that satisfy what they need to be tracking in a way that is consistent across the board and across all reports at the same time. There's no segregated data. There's no spreadsheet sitting on one person's computer that nobody else has access to or visibility into. None of that. It's all housed here on their system.
And what's nice here too is you have the flexibility of controlling permissions for different users and different personas. So, maybe the person that is responsible for, allocating expenses to this, you don't necessarily want them to be able to, edit a bunch of transactions or something like that. You can restrict that access, give them the ability to record those expenses as they come in and view the budgets, but not necessarily then, make a bunch of changes to other transactions and things like that. So
Yeah,
that's
the
one thing
user
that we
controls are very granular. Do you want to show those for a
yeah,
second?
yeah, yeah. So with MonkeyPod, another thing that we do is we do unlimited users. So you can see we've got a whole slew of folks in this admin account here. You can create any number of different roles here that give different permissions. And then as you're setting permissions for those different roles, you can see that we get really, really granular in terms of the details. If you look at financial, we have, for accounts, classes, tags, you can control whether or not folks can create them, view them, modify them, delete them, all that kind of stuff on through transactions and recurring transactions and budgets and all kinds of things there. So we really wanted to give you as much power as you need in order to get everybody in the system, but not have to worry about folks making mistakes or getting into areas that they don't necessarily need to get into. So
Well,
that's kind
let's
of
highlight a couple of things here. Board member is listed here
mhm.
by design. We absolutely have dashboards that are accessible and visible to board members, and that's all they can see. If they just care about a couple of KPIs that they want to track, we can build that into the dashboard in MonkeyPod, give them access to just that, and that's what they can take a look at. Same thing with volunteer. If we want them to just have a little bit of access to just a little bit of information because they're a volunteer and they have limited scope, this is where we would control for those permissions. So we talked about budget to actuals, and of course, all of this is built into MonkeyPod. So it's not like you're paying extra for those budgets, like it's part of the service. CRM integration for better management. I know a little bit less about CRM because I'm the accountant. I don't do the CRM side of it. So I'm going to let Matt talk about that one more. But I do think, Matt, you should show some of the data that is captured in a
Mhm.
profile, in a relationship profile that crosses over the accounting and the CRM. I
Yeah,
think that's
yeah.
our next step here.
So we'll start here on the dashboard, and we'll touch on this again in a moment. But just to note that there's a ton of different types of information that MonkeyPod is tracking, and we're able to keep track of it all in one place. So you can see we're looking at grant funding, we're looking at donations, how much or contributions by source, right in the same place that we're looking at email list performance, and in the same place that we're looking at donor retention. So this is really designed to give folks that need that holistic view the holistic view that they need. Again, we do unlimited users, and then this dashboard is customizable by the user. So you can, move your widgets around and get yourself the dashboard that you need without necessarily needing impacting anybody else on your team. But in terms of talking about how we tie the financial and relationship information together, one of the things I like to do is actually look at one of the grants that we have. So I'll go back to that Native Communities Partnership grant, and you can see in addition to all of the debits and credits and the transaction types and things like that, we have the relationship information associated with each of these right here as well. So we can see that one of the things that we're doing is we're writing a check to Brian Flynn, and if I need to know more about Brian Flynn, I can just click on that button and I go right to his record, and I'm able to see contact information. If I had social media handles, I can see how much he's given us in terms of donations so that we can, see how that's in relation to the spending that we've done. I can see what email list they're subscribed to. I can see all the interactions that we've had with them, whether I've sent them emails or, subscribed them to different mailing lists or had a phone call with them or anything like that. We're keeping track of all of that in the same place. But what I think is really cool is it's the same system as what your finances are. So if I need to then go back to a transaction, I can just click that button and now I'm in accounting land again. And I'm talking about debits and credits and I'm able to see all that kind of stuff. And the big thing here is it keeps everybody in sync. You never have to worry about is the information that the executive director is looking at the same as what the board member is looking at, the same as what the accountant is looking at, because it's all the same data. You can't mix it up that way. You're not worrying about whether or not two systems are talking to each other in real time. So,
If you
um,
go back, by the way, I'd like to point out a couple of other things that are captured in that relationship
oh yeah.
content. In particular, if any of you are familiar with CRM systems, there's a lot of stuff in here. Like they completed an email sent step. They subscribed to an email list. Can you scroll down just a smidge?
Mm-hmm.
And in particular, take a look at this one on September the 4th, called about programming and donation opportunities. So there was a call from our team to that person. This is where your team is going to record their interaction. So you always have a chronologic view of how the organization has interacted with either individuals or other organizations.
Mm-hmm.
All of it is visible on the same profile, same relationship, and all the data is captured here. I also want to take a quick look at households, although we're not going to
Mm-hmm.
focus on that. If you have householded relationships, you 100% have the capacity to do that in here as well. It's particularly useful if you have not only multiple people in a household, but if you have, say, one company with multiple users or parties within the company that you communicate with in different ways. That's
Mm-hmm.
another way that you can build your households.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the things that I always like to highlight here is, a lot of people think of households in donor relation terms, maybe one spouse is the primary person and then they have a secondary spouse, or, maybe you want to keep track of the kids that are in that family because they're, participating in summer camp programs or something like that. You can do all that with MonkeyPod, but where it's also helpful is if you're working with grant makers or foundations or things like that, you can make the parent entity the organization and then have all of the employees as child relationships underneath that. And that way, when you're going to the interactions view, if I go to the head of the household and I look at the interactions, I can see I've got all these transactions with the organization itself, but I can also include the whole household to see the relationship information that we're doing with that person. And if I had multiple people there, I'd be able to see all the emails that I'm sending to everybody at the organization all in one place. And that can be really huge if you do have a bunch of different contacts at a foundation that you're going back and forth with. You want to be able to see the holistic view of that conversation all in one place. And that's one of the things that we built MonkeyPod to do.
Yeah. And it works really, really well. It's one of my favorite features of it. All right, let me jump back in here. We are close to the end. So we talked about teams and how we keep in sync. I do want to share really quickly a example, a live example, not just from Matt's platform where he has template information or dummy information to generate this. This is a screenshot from one of my actual clients. These are the dashboard views that I provide them. Of course, there's no information on here for you to identify anyone, but
Mm-hmm.
this is what their team asked me for. This is what they said, look, we need to be able to see how much of restricted funds we have available at a glance. We need to know what our contributions by source are at a glance. We want to be able to see our email list performance. We want to see our donor retention. And those were the 4 most important KPIs they wanted to watch. So we built their dashboard around that. For one user, another user gets a different dashboard. It really depends on the user. So it's important to understand that the interface here is so customizable. It can feel overwhelming. It's okay. More importantly, it gives the user all the information that is most important to them and avoids data overload, which is what I find to be the case in many cases where we cannot customize what a single user is looking at. They end up missing things because they're looking at too much data and they don't know what to focus on. And it just isn't a very efficient way to look at what they need to look at. This is how we can allow them to focus on the things that are most important to their role as part of their job description, for instance. the dashboard is one of my favorite features here. We talked about, hold on, let's go on to our next one. Talked about our 3 common challenges, which were restricted grants, reimbursable grants, or reimbursable contracts, as we call them in MonkeyPod, and synchronizing data across your team. And the importance of addressing these is your financial health and, of course, how you steward the funds for your funders and take care of the resources that have been entrusted to you is all part of the conversation here. Using a product that is not designed for the purposes that you need it for is inherently going to create more challenges. The reason that MonkeyPod exists is to solve those challenges. And I will tell you, one of the bigger challenges that you, as someone who's interested in potentially using MonkeyPod, are going to have is convincing your current accountant or bookkeeper that this is a solution they should be learning. Most accountants and bookkeepers are not thrilled about learning a new program. They need to learn this. It's amazing. If they're anything like me, where they see something and they see the potential, your accountant should be excited about this because it makes their job easier. They no longer have to track restricted funds on a spreadsheet on somebody's computer and rely on the fact that every single time an update happens, it's going to get on that spreadsheet. Those are the realities that a lot of accountants are living with right now. So realities a lot of executive directors are living with right now. This solves all of those. There is some resistance sometimes to learning new programs, but the amount of efficiency that it allows you to adopt and allows you to track everything in a way that is easy for everyone to access, in my opinion, overcomes any resistance, natural human resistance to learning a new product. So just putting my 2 cents out there. Let's jump into call to action. If you would like to learn more, of course, go to monkeypod.io, check them out. If you'd like to learn more about me, my website is ethicalprofits.org. That's pretty much the essence of our presentation for today. I want to invite us to talk about any questions you have or any specific challenges that you're currently facing. And let's talk about those. We've got about 13 minutes left to address Q&A, or unless Matt, you wanted to address anything else before we jump into that. Sorry to just take that over.
No. Yeah, no, that's great. I think that's a great summary. Like I said, yeah, like Jen said, hopefully you're able to see what some of the sort of workflow efficiencies can be and sort of the benefit of having everything in one place in a tool that is built for nonprofits. And hopefully it can kind of maybe address some of those stressful anxieties that you have about your finances as the end of the year approaches. But yeah, I've let folks can unmute themselves if they have any questions, or you can feel free to ask those in the chat. But we'll kind of open the floor now in case there are any specific questions. Aaron, to your question in the chat, yes, we'll share this deck out as well as a recording of this conversation so that you can refer back to it and all that good stuff. So that will definitely be done. Laura, yes, that's a great question. We do a free trial. Everybody can do a 14-day free trial. Don't even have to enter in a credit card number or anything like that to get set up. You can do that by just going to monkeypod.io/register. Then you can create your user account and create an organization account. We don't by default populate that with data, but we do have data at the ready basically if you want to go down that road. So you can just reach out to our team either via email or we have a little button in the lower right corner you probably saw that says support. If you want to get some dummy data in there populated so that you can explore a little bit, we're more than happy to do that. And you can also reach out directly to me if you'd like. I'm just matt@monkeypod.io.
Any other questions? Looks like we've got another one here. Oh, Laura, thank you. Welcome. One of the things that MonkeyPod brings to the table as well is a weekly support meeting where anyone, either MonkeyPod users or not, if you're just still interested, you want to learn more, we have a Welcome Wednesday meeting. And every Wednesday, one of the MonkeyPod team, and usually either myself or my partner, will join the call and basically answer questions live. You share whatever your challenges are, whatever the frustration is you're dealing with, and we talk through how to fix that. And most of the time, that's a MonkeyPod solution. So in a lot of cases, yes, it's for people that have already adopted MonkeyPod because they're coming there to figure out how to use the tool best. But we also definitely field questions from new users on how, for instance, best practices would be around using the tool.
Yep, and Jen is a lifeline at those Welcome Wednesdays for someone like myself that doesn't have as much accounting experience. I'm very appreciative of being able to pivot to Jen when something comes up that I can't answer. Um, there are no other questions. We can wrap things up a little early, give you all 10 minutes back in your day. Like I said, we will be sending out this recording as well as a copy of the slides so that if you do have any additional questions or want to look back at the material, you can do that. And then, of course, feel free to reach out to myself or reach out to Jen if you are interested in either learning more about MonkeyPod or any of the services that Ethical Profits provides. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of
Glad
your
to see
day.
you all. Have a great rest of your day. Bye bye.